Hello Tech Genius, I am Ravi. Have you ever imagined a place where learning is as dynamic as the technology shaping your world? Then here's a deal. With iMatix, you can make sure the learning is exciting, impactful right from the beginning. You have interactive sessions with expert-led courses. In the world of tech, from data science to cloud computing, it's not just about a session, it's about doing, building, learning by solving real problems. So let's get started. Any of the reporting, not specifically about Workday, any of the report is nothing but which actually returns the data from the system. The data that is coming from the system is nothing but through reports you can actually extract the data. And extracting data in the form of reports are multiple ways. In traditional software systems like PeopleSoft, SAP, we should have databases. SQL Server or DB tool, SQL, Oracle tool kind of things, where you'll be writing all the SQLs to return the data that is sitting in the system. Those are nothing but databases. Database commands like SQLPL, SQLs, you'll be writing to return all the data that is sitting. Let's say select star from table name will give whatever data that stores in the table. You'll be getting an output format where you can extract that output and see what's happening in the table. Similarly, in other scenarios, you'll be able to get the data that is sitting in the table. We have not many tables, right? In not many tables, data will be sitting. And similarly, when compare this with Workday, you might not write a sequence or any kind of expressions, but the kind of similar functionality, similar kind of works that you'll be doing to extract the data that is sitting in Workday. Now to compare, I don't know whether you will understand the differences that I'll be explaining, but try to take this because this is the foundation of reporting, which is important. Reporting is very important for Workday. If you just know reporting, don't know anything, there are lots of opening of reporting. If you are expert, if you are sound in reporting, you have a lot of opportunities to get into Workday reporting roles. Just try to understand right from the foundation what I'll be explaining. If you're not clear, just raise a question and get that clarified. The other sessions are different. What we had, even if you don't understand with the configurations, if you go, that will let you to understand. But this is something, if you know the basics only, you'll be able to create a report. If you don't know the basics, if you don't know the actual theory of reporting, you will not be able to create reports. There is a reason why be more focused. And if you're not following anything, raise a question. As I said, right? Traditional software applications. We have a kind of table from which we'll be calling the data that is sitting on the table. If you remember in my initial sessions, the very first demo or the very first session, I would have explained you the data model that Workday will be following. Anyone remember what is the data model that Workday will be following? Anyone remember? How does data get stored into Workday? These things, I would have explained in my demo or in the first initial sessions. Any one of you remember here? How does data get stored in Workday? And what is the model that Workday will be following in terms of actually managing data? Anyone remember? How does data get stored? Anyone remember? You've worked on business process. You've worked on supervisor organizations. You've hired employees. You created positions, right? You manage some security also. Now tell me, how does data get stored in Workday? You've hired an employee. You're getting an employee into the system. How does this employee stored in Workday? You've created a position. How does this position stored in Workday follows the data model called object model? Whatever data that you actually insert into Workday will be stored in the form of business object. When you hire an employee, that employee information will be stored in employee business object. Worker business object. When you're hiring an employee or worker, that data will be stored in worker business object. When you're actually creating positions will be stored in positions related business object. When you're actually creating dependents of an employee, that information will be stored in dependent business object. When you're actually creating compensation, create package compliance, and all those will be sitting in related compensation business object. In a reading, suppose your organization, that will be stored in organization business object. Every data that you create in Workday will be stored in their own related business object. And when you wanted to extract the data that is sitting in Workday, you need to know from which business object that you wanted to pull the data. You are getting the data into Workday that will be stored in those relevant business object. Now, when you're trying to extract the data, trying to get the data, probably you wanted to send your data to external systems through integrations. If you wanted to extract the data, you need to know what business object that the data is sitting in, and you need to extract the data sitting in from the business object. Like that, if you compare, in traditional software application, we call it a table. Table is nothing but which stores the data. In other software technologies, all the data will be stored in the form of table. And in Workday, all the data will be stored in the form of business object. Someone asked you what is the model that Workday will be following in order to manage data. You should say Workday follows object-based data model which stores data in the form of business object. We have a child table and child table. We have a child table which is related to the parent table. Similarly, in Workday we call it as related business object. If you wanted to create a report on worker where you will be getting all the worker information, worker name, worker FID, and worker supervisor, organization, manager, location, address, salary, anything related to worker. If you wanted to build a report, you'll be getting the data from worker business and in the same report. If there is a requirement to get worker dependent information also, maybe spouse or children kind of information, if that report wanted to have what you'll be adding dependent as a kind of business object, and the dependent will be becoming related business object. Whenever you add any business object that is not the primary business object in the report, that business object will become a related business object. When I say related business object, it is nothing but child table. You will be creating a report on business object which will be your primary business object. And in the same report, if you're adding multiple other business objects, will become a related business object. And traditional software application, we call it as view or SQL view. In Workday, we call it as data sources. What is the data source? The name itself says that it is a source of the data. Let's say if someone asks you to return all the contractors' information, I wanted to know who are all the contractors that are sitting in the system. I want to know that information. Now contractor is also a worker, right? Contractor also is a worker. When you are actually going to the worker business object, you will specify your data source as a contractors. When you run a report, that will go into worker business object and pull only contractors. And similarly, if you give data sources all active employees, if you are giving data sources all active employees, what does this will do? This will go for that particular business object called worker, and it will look for only active employees and full active employees. It will not pull contractors. It will not pull terminated. It will not pull people who went on leave. It will not pull retirees. It will not pull any other employees other than active. Since you are mentioning data sources as active employees, your report will run and go to the certain business object, and it will pull for active employees. Data source is nothing but source of the data view of your business object. You are getting the data from the business object in the form of data source. Based on the data source, you are trying to get the data that is sitting in the business object. These three are very important. If you are working on reports, you will be working on these three business object related business object data sources. These three are important, without which you cannot create a report. If you know these three, how does these three works? You are through to the reporting concept. You will be able to understand how reporting works. Any questions or anything not clear here? Because this is very important. If you are not clear, just raise a question. If you are not able to follow, just try to get me that. I am not following this one. I didn't understand this. Just raise questions. Because if you are not understanding this, you are definitely not able to understand the other reporting concepts. It is a data model to extract the reports. It is not a model. Business object is nothing but which stores the data. The model that Workday will be following to store the data is object model. Business object is nothing but which allows you to store the data in Workday in the form of business object. What is an example? you would have hired a lot many workers. When you are creating a supposed organization, when you are hiring, you would have hired a lot many workers, right? Now I will ask you, get me all the workers that you have hired in a report. I will ask you how you will do this. We'll get the data from worker business object, because when you hired workers, that workers went to worker business object, and from that you will be getting all the workers, because you know that workers are sitting in worker business object. You are able to use worker business object in a report and pull that one. Now if I am telling you I also wanted to have all the dependents of that worker, I wanted to know the information of their dependents, like spouse information, child information, their age, their things and all. I wanted to know how you will be doing. You will not be getting dependent information from worker, right? Dependents are nothing but other information. They are not workers. They are not workers. Dependents are not workers, right? Dependents are related to worker. Dependents are related to worker. What you can do, you need to use that specific object which used to pull dependent information. We have dependent as a kind of other business object which you can use in the same report. When you are using any other business object in that report apart from the primary business object, that business object will become related business object, which is nothing but child business object, child object. This one would be the parent one. Let's say if you are creating report where you are trying to pull worker information, this would be your primary business subject. Primary business subject. And then when you are adding objects that stores different information, let's say dependent is one thing where you are trying to pull all the dependents of a worker. Then this will become a related business object, which is nothing but child object. And this would become, when you add child, this would become parent object. The primary business object will always be prepared, and anything related with the subject will be child business object. And similarly, if you wanted to get ratings of an employee, whatever manager has given manager rating, if you wanted to get for an employee, you can give that specific, let's say, employer review business object, which will be holding all the reviews that employer has got from the manager. Employee review, sorry. What is this? What object this will be coming under? This is a parent or child employee review. I am adding the same report to get reviews that manager has given to an employee. This would become a parent object or child object. This will become another child. Like this, you can add any number of business object that will be as a kind of a related business object. You can add a number of related business object to the report which are child business objects to the parent one. You can add employee review. You can add learning. If an employee has completed any learning endowments, you can add learning endowments. And you can add payroll. What is the pay that employee has taken? payroll related information you can add, and you can add anything related to compensation. You can add anything that you can add as a kind of a related business object for the primary business object. And you can add a number of related business object in the report. Depends upon your requirement. Now tell me, what is the difference between primary business object and related business object? What is the difference primary business object and related business object? Primary will get the employee information and related will get the information which is related to employees. No, that should not be your answer. That's an example that I've given. When I asked primary, what would be the primary business object? Whenever you're creating a report, whatever the object that you are selecting, that will be your primary business object. And any other object that you're adding in a report other than primary are related business object. These are the examples. Let's say if you're creating report with the dependent business object, this will be your primary business object. Here I said earlier, when you're creating report with the worker, worker will become your primary business subject because you have chosen worker as your business object. And then if worker is not there in the scenario and someone asked, you get me all the dependents of employees who are sitting in the system. You'll create report with the dependent as a business object. Now dependent will become a primary business object. If you're adding worker to that report, worker will become a related business object. Because you have chosen dependent as a kind of primary business object. And then if you're adding worker to that report as a related business object, this will become a child object. And this will be your primary business object. Similarly, if you're creating report with the learning enrollments as a kind of business object, this will be your primary business object. And if you're adding worker to that report, worker will become related to business object. It's not that only worker will always be the primary business object. Worker will also be related business object based on the primary business object that you've taken. Primary business object under the business object to maintain parent-child relationships. Clear with this? Anyone did not understand this? This is very important. If you're trying to follow this when you're creating report or when you're making any kind of reports based on the requirements that you get, you'll be able to complete without any kind of data missing. If you're not able to understand the concept, if you're trying to create reports, you'll not be able to understand. Now tell me, what are all these things? What objects are all these things? What are all these things? What these objects will become now? Related to business objects. These are all related to business objects. Now, if I'm actually creating report on learning environment, I've added worker as a kind of object. which is the primary business object and which is related to business object here. Learning environment. Learning environment would be your primary business object. Your worker would be child. Your worker would be child business subject. In the scenario, you'll be getting a lot of reports. If you know how the data model and kind of object-based concept, you'll be able to understand the reporting part. You'll be getting a lot of requirements in reporting. You need to understand the base. You know how to get the data from where you need to get the data when you're actually adding related business object. How to actually make some kind of filters to the data you should be understanding. When you know these basics, you'll be able to understand that one's concepts also. Now everyone are clear with the primary business object and related business object. Anything not clear with these two terms, primary and related? If you're not able to understand, if you're not understanding, just raise a concern. Don't just take it, because all other further concepts and reporting will be based on this. If you're not understanding, just hold on. Raise a question and get it clarified. Now the source. Source. I was telling you, whatever is data source that you are giving, your report will be running based on this data source. But the data will be coming from business object. Whatever the primary business object that you have chosen when you're creating report, this data source will go to the primary business object and get the data. If you're given all workers, it will go to the worker business object and pull all the information. Because you have not specified anything specific, you wanted to have all workers. Right? Since you have not specified anything, any specific criteria, your source will be pulling all the workers from the worker business object. And if you have given all terminated, what do your report will do? The report will go to the primary business object and looks for only terminated. It will not pick any other criteria. It will only look for terminated employees and which will pull all the terminated employee input. And similarly, if you wanted to pull people who went on leave, who are on leave, they will be taking only your related data source, which will go to the worker business object and looks for all the employees who went on leave. Data source is nothing but it is a view of your business object. View of your business object is nothing but the data that is sitting in the business object. Data source is returning based on the criteria that you have given. Data source. Without data source, you cannot create any report in Workday. Automatically, when you give your data source, based on this data source, your business object will be auto-operated in Workday report. Data source is nothing but view of your business object. Now if I wanted to give, if I have a requirement to get all the employees who have got retired in the system. Someone has asked me, I wanted to know all the retires who have got retired from the employment. I wanted to have all this information. What would be your work around here? What data source that you will take here? For active employees, you have taken active employees. The source, you have taken active employees with which you will be getting only active employees. For terminated employees, you are taking all the terminated employees. That your report will consist of only terminated employees. For employees who went on leave, you are taking that specific related business, that specific data source. And that will be returning employees who are on leave. Now my requirement is I wanted to have all the retirees. What data source that you will take? Retired worker? There is a specific data source for retirees. You need to choose that data source. The data source is all retirees. The data source you will be picking that will return for all the retirees. Don't worry about the names of the data sources. You will get to know based on number of report that you create, and I will tell you the easy way how you can identify names of the sources and all. But just try to understand the concept. Forget about name. I don't know. I don't know what business or whether they are in the system. How would I tell you how the data comes? I don't know what data sources that are sitting in the system. How can I get you the names? Forget about the names. Just try to understand the concept. If I am asking you to get retirees, you should be understanding that relevant data source which pulls retiree information. You need to use that data source. At least you should have this minimum understanding at this stage now. At least you need to have this understanding. Probably when we are completing reporting, you would be in a position to identify the data sources that are sitting in the system. Ways and objects fields, all you will be able to identify. But at this moment, since we are starting, at least you should know the concept. If you wanted to actually return the retirees, you must know that there is specific source that looks for data sources and that pulls all the retirees. At this stage at least, you need to have this understanding. Clear with the data source. Any questions on the data source? What is data source? Tell me. What is the data source? View of business object? Nothing but view of business object. Whatever data that is sitting in the business object you are seeing in the form of data sources. You will be giving data source and your data will be returned from the business object through the data source. You can say technically whatever data that you are viewing in Workday in the reports, there is nothing but view of your business object through the data sources that you are choosing. Any questions far? Any questions or anything unclear till now? Start off. Can I look at this? Try to search, not to go little deep into some data source. You can go a little deep into it. In Workday, we have two types of data sources. One is standard data source, the other one is indexed data source. The difference between these two data sources are, let us say, as an example, I asked you to actually get all the terminated employees. what you will be doing? You will be choosing terminated employees as a kind of data source, and you will be pulling all the terminated data from the report because you have chosen data source related to terminated workers, through which you are getting only terminated data. Now let us say, instead of using terminated data source, if you use all workers data source, what you will be getting? Instead of all terminated, if you are using all workers, what you will be getting? You will be getting all the employees terminated, you will be getting contractors, you will be getting retirees, you will be getting active, you will be getting people who went on leave. Every employee category you will be getting because you are choosing data source as all workers. You are getting from this name itself is saying that all the status, all the criteria of employee will be pulling all workers. You are creating a report to pull all the workers, but your requirement is to get all the terminated employees. But you have chosen all workers as the data source. How do you actually get terminated from all workers? You know, when you use data sources related to terminated, you know you will be getting terminated. But you also should know how to get terminated workers when you use the data source all workers. You can write a rule here. In a report, you can write a filter to filter the data for terminated employees. You will be writing worker status is equal to terminated. You will be writing this criteria that even your report is running up. It will be going to primary business object or worker business object, and it will be getting all the workers because you have given all workers. And when report is running, since you have filtered the data with this thing, worker status is equal to terminated. Then, as a second step, after collecting all the data from the primary business object, it will filter the data from what it has collected and gives terminated reports because you are writing a condition here. Where worker status is equal to terminated, you wanted to have your report to pull the returns. Here two steps it is performing. If you give the source all terminated, there is no second step. Straightforward, your report will do worker business object and it will pull terminated business object. But you are giving all workers here. It will perform multiple steps. It will go and pull all the workers, and then based on this condition that you are giving from the information that it has pulled, it will be filtering the data for terminated data points. Here two steps you are doing. Same thing if you relate to this one standard data source. Where if you are giving standard data source all workers, you need to write filter condition for that one. But if you are taking indexed data source at source level only, if you are choosing all workers as indexed data source type. Now this is a standard one. Whatever example that I have given, the standard one, if you are choosing standard data source called all workers, indexed data source. But if you have a requirement to pull terminated employees, you need to write separate condition here. But if you are choosing same all workers as indexed, indexed one, If you are choosing data source all workers as indexed one, you do not need to write a specific condition because indexed data source will hold built-in filter options. Within source only you can actually filter that one. In the filter you can specify terminated. Rather than adding separate line of condition in the report, at source level only indexed data source. At source level only you can specify that you are looking for only terminated, that when your report runs it will be faster because there is not looking for second step. And indexed data source will have an option to add your filter options at source level only. That the moment you click on run button or report, this will straightly go and pull the terminated employees. But here what it is doing, it is pulling all the workers and then it is reading this condition, filtering for terminated employees. Here it is performing two steps. It is taking little time, but here it is performing only single step because indexed data source, as you have an option to filter the data from source level only, and in the source filter you have to get terminated. And the moment you run that report, that will straightly go to the business object and pull for terminated employees. Indexed data source provides built-in prompters, filters huge amount of data, optimizes your data, and the performance of indexed data sources is more better than standard data source. When you create reports on standard data source and indexed data source performance will be more faster than standard data source. Because your indexed data source is not looking for additional filters, as it has its own filters at source level only. It is slightly looking for the data and returning. It is not a time-taking activity for indexed data source. And that is the reason why the report execution time will be little faster than the report's runtime for standard reports. Here understood this index versus standard data source. Is it clear or not? What is the difference between indexed data source and standard data source? If someone asks you, what should be your answer? What is the difference between indexed data source and standard data source? What should be your answer? In index, the filtering will be more easy, steps will be lesser, and it takes less time to filter. Indexed data source at source level only, it has filtering options. No need of adding any additional filters. And there is a reason why. What's the purpose of standard? Like we can always use indexed, right? What's the additional purpose of standard? After reporting, we'll be discussing the concept called calculated field, where you'll be tweaking the data. Those calculated fields can be used in standard data source reports, but not in indexed data source. The calculated field can more appropriately works better in standard data source related reports, but you might not add calculated fields in indexed data source. That could be the reason. If you are building a compensation report, if someone asks you to get what is the annual compensation hike that employee is getting, what is the bonus percentage that employee is getting increment, there are no delivered field that Workday provides for this purpose. You need to create some calculations. And if in order to use that calculations in a report, The standard report works best when you wanted to use those calculations in a report. Most of the calculations might not look for indexed data source. If you have huge amount of data that you wanted to execute, in that scenario, you may take indexed data source. But if you wanted to perform a lot of calculations, let's say you're building a report and your report should return all the benefit, elections of an employee. You need to have all these benefits to be coming into worker business object, but benefits information will be sitting in benefit in the business object. Now we can make some calculations to get benefits data into worker business object, and that worker and that fields, whatever you're making for calculated fields, right? That you will be able to pull those fields in only the report where you have chosen all workers or worker related business object with standard data source. Wherever you have used standard data source related to worker, you will be able to pull these calculated fields. But same thing, if you are trying to pull in indexed data source, it will not pull because the source, whatever data source that I am taking, right? Indexed data source. Indexed data source will not be able to have the fields in its reports. Probably you'll be able to see when we're getting into calculated fields. But that would be the main criteria why we choose your standard reports versus indexed reports. When you have a lot of data requirements, you'll be obviously going for standard data source related reports. But when you don't have any calculated fields and your data requirements are straight where the worker delivered fields will work for you, then in that scenario you can actually choose indexed data source. The performance will be faster and the runtime will be faster than standard data source. Make sense? If you are aware of all these terms, you know what I was referring, know the features of this. Your reporting will be easy for you when you're trying to understand more. Before you know about reporting, knowing this will definitely help you. This is the base. You'll not be getting this information. Even if you go for training, Workday training, all these things you'll not be getting. Because they'll talk about Workday reporting, they'll not talk about any phone number. Let's say if you're going for Workday certification, reporting certification or training, they'll try to create reports and show how does Workday reports works and what is, the worker business subject, what field that worker business subject will be holding what, how you want to identify this. That level of information within Workday reporting they'll be able to cover. But if you're not a techie, if you're not having any kind of reporting background or any kind of database background, this is the kind of initial foundation that you must be aware. If you're aware of these terms, you'll be able to understand reporting. And once you're aware of this thing, there are a lot of other areas of reporting that we need to understand. Till now, any questions anyone have? Anything that is not clear for? Anything that is not clear? After we know these, and when you're trying to more about Workday reporting, you should know that Workday will be having two types of reports. One is standard report. Another one is custom report. Standard report, the name itself says that these are delivered reports which are provided by Workday. Standard reports are provided by Workday and customers will be using these reports that are provided by Workday. And these standard reports, you cannot edit these reports. You cannot add any additional information to these standard reports. You need to use as they are provided by Workday. That's how they are. You just need to use those reports. You will not get any edit option. Any other options you will not get. You just get run option. You will be running and viewing the data. You cannot edit those reports. And custom reports which you are creating right from the scratch. As per your own requirement, you are creating custom report from the scratch. There is a difference between standard report and custom report. And when you are creating a custom, when you are looking for a standard report that is giving all the information that you need but it is missing. If it is missing one or two fields, one or two information, let's say address report is there, which is giving all the information of address, but it is missing postal code. It is missing city. These two are very important to have an address. For just two fields, going and building a custom report might not work. Because all the information your standard report is giving, but only two fields it is missing. Just two fields, making custom report is not a good decision. Workday provides an option to copy your standard reports to custom report. You can copy your standard reports and make that report as a custom report and add the fields that you wanted to have, and then use according to your requirements. When you copy your standard report to custom report, you will be able to edit that report and add the fields that you wanted to have on a report as per your requirements. When you are actually copying your standard report to custom report, it means that it is creating a new version of the report which is a custom report. But it does not mean that the entire standard report is going out and becoming a custom report. It is not that. For example, address is one thing that I was referring. You wanted to add postal code and city to this report, and you are copying this address report to custom report. Here it means that address report is not completely converting to custom report. The actual version address will be there, but it is giving a new version for you to add the data according to your requirements. It is, when you are copying, it is creating another version of the report for you. But the actual standard report address will be always remains the same. That gives you the standard data will not give any options to edit. But if you are copying that one, it is giving you another version of this report with all the information that it has and allows you to add any additional data that you wanted to have. That you need to know. That's the standard reports is for the categories, two types of reports. First type is called as a report writer. The second type is called as express or type of reports. The standard reports is of two types of reports, report writer or express or type of reports. The features of this reporting is that when you wanted to copy your standard report to custom report, you can only copy of standard report with the type of report, right? You cannot copy express for reports. Now address. I was referring right. Address is an example. If address report, standard report is of report writer type, then only I will be able to copy and add postal report and city fields to the name. If it is not a standard report, if it is express for, I will not able to copy that report. Standard reports can be copied only when it's report written, only when the type is report writer type. They cannot be copied when the type is express for. Now tell me what is the difference between standard report and custom report. We cannot edit standard reports, but custom report we can customize accordingly. After copying from the standard model, standard reports are provided by both day and they can just run those standard reports and view the data. You cannot add any additional information to the report. But custom report is what you are creating. You are creating right from the scratch. You can edit and make any kind of changes to the custom report. Custom reports are created by customers and standard reports are provided by Workday to its customers. What types of standard reports are provided by the standard reports? Report writer and express. What is the difference between these two? You can edit only the reports of type report writer. Expressible reports, you cannot edit. And in order to perform all these activities, whatever I was referring, all these reporting activities, if you wanted to perform in the tenant, you need to have a separate security. Only when you have that security, you will be able to create reports. There is a user-based security group called report writer. Don't confuse between this one and this one. These are independent. There is a security group called report writer, which is a user-based security group that is provided by Workday that grants you access to create reports, to copy custom reports from standard reports, to view standard reports, to create custom reports. And all these things you will be getting access only when you have report writer as a security group attached into your profile or attached to any other security group that will be associated to you. Report writer is a security group that lets you to create reports. If you are not able to view the reports, you are not even able to find the report that are there in the system, which means that you don't have a right security to view reports in Workday. That needs to be granted with report writer security group. And there are a few other types of custom reports probably we will discuss in our tomorrow session. And we want to give huge information for you. I am preparing a document. I am preparing a document for this one. Hopefully, you will be getting a reporting document to use sometime this week. By the time we complete reporting, you should be getting a document with all the things that I am talking about. That will be a reference for you. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.